to Daily Review, your daily dose of literary exploration. We dive into books that spark curiosity and ignite growth. While our passion often leads us to nonfiction reads that empower and improve your life, no book is off limits. From gripping thrillers to insightful memoirs and compelling fiction to historical accounts, we're here to share and discuss all the interesting reads we discover. Tune in for your next great book idea.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Daily Review. We truly appreciate you joining us for your daily dose of literary exploration. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to share these amazing books with you. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a truly insightful and popular book that many of you have asked us to explore, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Our mission today is to explore Housel's core premise, that doing well with money has less to do with how smart you are, how many complex formulas you know, or how accurately you predict the market. Instead, it has a lot more to do with your behavior. We're going to delve into how our deeply human emotions, our unique personal experiences, and often our counterintuitive thinking shape our financial decisions in ways that traditional, purely rational finance models often completely overlook.
That's right. This isn't about deciphering complex financial statements or mastering some kind of investment algorithm. It's about peeling back the layers to understand the fundamental human element that really drives financial outcomes.
Yeah, the human side.
And these are lessons that, regardless of your current financial standing or where you want to be, they're pretty much universally applicable.
So let's unpack this core idea with a couple of opening anecdotes from the book itself that perfectly illustrate why behavior often trumps raw intelligence when it comes to money. We'll sort of set the stage with some powerful contrasts.
Okay, the first story introduces us to a wildly successful tech executive. This individual was, by all accounts, a genius. I mean, in his 20s, he designed and patented a key component in Wi-Fi routers.
Wow, yeah.
He started and sold multiple companies, achieving, immense financial success. However, his relationship with money was, frankly, a bit chaotic, a strange blend of insecurity and, outright recklessness.
How so?
Well, he'd often walk around with stacks of $100 bills, several inches thick apparently, openly showing them off, loudly and often drunkenly bragging about his wealth to anyone within earshot.
Okay, that's a bit much.
It gets even more bizarre. One day, he actually handed a valet several $1,000s and instructed him to go buy $1,000 gold coins.
Gold coins? Seriously?
Seriously. An hour later, with the coins in hand, he and his buddies gathered by a dock, gleefully skipping these valuable gold coins into the Pacific Ocean just for fun, arguing over whose coin went furthest.
Skipping gold coins into the ocean. Okay.
And later, when he shattered a lamp in a hotel restaurant and a manager told him it was a $500 charge, he pulled out what the book calls a brick of cash and paid $5,000.
$5,000 for a lamp?
Yep. Arrogantly telling the manager, "Now get out of my face and don't ever insult me like that again." You have to wonder, how could this possibly last?
Right. You just know it won't end well.
And the answer, as the book reveals, was not long. Years later, this same tech executive went completely broke.
Wow. Okay, so that's one end of the spectrum.
Now, contrast that with the remarkable story of Ronald James Reed, a man whose Wikipedia entry begins, and I quote, "Ronald James Reed was an American philanthropist, investor, janitor, and gas station attendant."
A janitor and gas station attendant.
Exactly. Born in rural Vermont, he was actually the first in his family to graduate high school, and he famously hitchhiked daily to get there. His life was incredibly modest and low-key.
So very different from the tech guy.
Totally different. He worked as a gas station attendant fixing cars for 25 years, then swept floors at JCPenney for another 17 years. He bought a humble two-bedroom house for just $12,000 at age 38 and lived there his entire life.
$12,000. Wow.
Widowed at 50, he never remarried, and his main hobby was simply chopping firewood. He passed away in 2014 at the age of 92.
And that's when this unassuming janitor made international headlines. Because out of nearly 3 million Americans who died that year, fewer than 4,000 had a net worth over $8 million. Ronald Reed was one of them.
$8 million, the janitor.
$8 million. He left $2 million to his stepchildren and over $6 million to his local hospital and library. Those who knew him were, understandably, absolutely baffled. Where did it all come from?
Yeah, I bet they were. So what was the secret? Lottery? Inheritance?
The secret was, there was no secret. No lottery win, no inheritance, no high-paying job. He simply saved what little he could, consistently invested it in a diversified portfolio of blue-chip stocks, and then he just waited.
Waited.
For decades, those relatively tiny savings compounded into more than $8 million.
That's incredible, just patience and time.
Exactly. Now, just a few months before Ronald Reed passed, another man named Richard Fuscone was also in the news. Richard was, in many ways, the polar opposite of Ronald Reagan.
Okay, who was he?
A Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA. Fuscone had such a successful career in finance that he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. He was widely praised for his business savvy, leadership skills, sound judgment, and personal integrity.
It sounds like the definition of financial success, right? Ivy League, Wall Street, early retirement.
You'd think so. But then, much like our gold coin-skipping tech executive, everything came crashing down for Fuscone.
Oh no, not again. What happened?
That's the real twist here. In the mid-2000s, Fuscone borrowed heavily to expand his already enormous 18,000-square-foot home in Greenwich, Connecticut. A mansion boasting 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, and 7 garages.
Who needs 2 elevators?
Right, and it cost over $90,000 a month just to maintain.
$90,000 a month, just on upkeep. Wow.
So when the 2008 financial crisis hit, his high debt and illiquid assets just turned to dust. He went bankrupt, allegedly telling a judge in 2008 that he had no income.
No income. After retiring early as a philanthropist.
Exactly. His Palm Beach house was foreclosed, and in 2014, his Greenwich mansion sold for 75% less than its estimated worth.
Ouch. So what we see in these 2 contrasting stories is really quite striking, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Ronald Reed was patient, lived within his means, and allowed the incredible power of compounding to work its magic over a lifetime. Richard Fuscone, despite all his impressive education and high-flying career, well, he succumbed to unchecked greed and that desire for extravagant appearances.
Trying to look rich instead of being wealthy.
Precisely. And this simple behavioral distinction completely eclipsed the massive education and experience gap between them, leading to wildly different financial outcomes.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? The book really drives home that financial success isn't a hard science guided by immutable laws like physics or math, where you can just plug in variables and get a predictable outcome.
Right, it's not deterministic like that.
Instead, it's a soft skill, deeply driven by human behavior, emotions, and unique personal histories. Throughout this deep dive, we're going to explore how some of the most intelligent, highly educated people make catastrophic financial mistakes, while seemingly ordinary individuals build extraordinary wealth, all by understanding and applying these counterintuitive features of the psychology of money. Okay, let's begin with a really foundational idea from the book, captured perfectly by the phrase, "No one's crazy." It's a powerful statement because it challenges our natural inclination to judge others' financial decisions, doesn't it?
It really does. The core idea is simple yet profound. What seems completely irrational or even insane to one person about money might make perfect sense to another.
Why is that?
Because what you've experienced directly and personally is far more compelling and deeply ingrained than anything you learned secondhand. We all come to our financial decisions anchored by a unique set of views, shaped by our specific lives and the economic realities we grew up in.
So personal experience trumps textbook knowledge.
Absolutely. Think about the stark difference in perspective between someone who grew up in extreme poverty versus, say, the child of a wealthy banker. Their fundamental understanding of risk, reward, even the very purpose of money is going to be fundamentally different.
Yeah, completely different worlds.
Or consider someone who lived through a period of hyperinflation where their savings were constantly eroding versus someone who's only known decades of stable prices. Even a seasoned stockbroker who lost everything in the Great Depression will have a vastly different, more visceral understanding of market risk than a tech worker who mostly experienced the boom times of the dot-com era in the late 90s.
Those experiences really leave a mark.
They do. These formative experiences create a deeply personal and often emotional lens through which we view the world, and no amount of studying can truly replicate the indelible impact of having lived through something like that.
The book really drives this point home with that anecdote about John F. Kennedy, right?
Yes, exactly. When he was campaigning for president, our reporter asked him what he remembered from the Great Depression, a defining economic event for an entire generation.
And his answer was pretty surprising.
It was very candid. He said, "I have no first-hand knowledge of the Depression. My family had one of the great fortunes of the world, and it was worth more than ever then. We had bigger houses, more servants, we traveled more. About the only thing that I saw directly was when my father hired some extra gardeners just to give them a job so they could eat." I really did not learn about the Depression until I read about it at Harvard.
Wow. So he basically missed it entirely, despite living through it.
Pretty much. And this wasn't just a casual remark. It became a significant point in the 1960 election. People genuinely questioned how someone with no personal lived understanding of such a monumental economic upheaval could truly be entrusted with managing the national economy.
It makes sense. How can you relate if you haven't felt it?
It powerfully illustrates that personal experience with its emotional scars and indelible lessons shapes your understanding in a way that mere intellectual study or academic learning simply cannot.
And this isn't just stories, right? There's research backing this up.
Oh, absolutely. It's backed by robust research. Academics Ulrich Malmendier and Stefan Nagel from the National Bureau of Economic Research conducted a study spanning 50 years of consumer finances. They found compelling evidence that people's lifetime investment decisions are heavily anchored to the experiences they had early in their adult lives.
Anchored? How so?
Well, for example, if you grew up during a period of high inflation, you were much less likely to invest heavily in bonds later in life. Conversely, if you experienced a strong bull market early on, you tended to invest more aggressively in stocks later.
So it wasn't about smarts or education.
Not primarily. It wasn't about their intelligence, their education level, or their financial literacy. It was simply the dumb luck, as the author puts it, of when and where they were born.
Dumb luck. That's a bit humbling.
It is. Even someone as brilliant as Bill Gross, the legendary bond manager, admitted that his unparalleled career success coincided almost perfectly with a generational collapse in interest rates, which made bonds seem like wealth-generating machines to him.
While his dad's generation probably saw them differently.
Exactly. His father's generation, having lived through periods of higher inflation, might have seen bonds more as wealth incinerators. These subtle yet profound differences, based on your birth year, mean that someone born in 1970, seeing the S&P 500 increase tenfold in their teens and 20s, has a fundamentally different psychological view of the market than someone born in 1950, for whom the market went nowhere, adjusted for inflation during their formative years.
It's a truly humbling perspective, isn't it? Consider inflation itself. If you were born in 1960s America, prices more than tripled during your impressionable teens and 20s. You'd have vivid memories of gas lines, your parents struggling.
Yeah, it would be seared into your memory.
But if you were born in 1990, inflation has been so consistently low that it's likely never even crossed your mind as a major pressing financial concern.
It's just background noise, if that.
And the same goes for vastly different economic realities, like the unemployment rates for different demographics. They can vary wildly. Or think about stock markets globally. Germany and Japan wiped out after WWII, while the U.S. market doubled.
Given these wildly disparate backgrounds and experiences, no one should reasonably expect people from such different worlds to think the same way about money, respond to financial information similarly, or even trust the same sources of advice.
Right. Our individual financial views are formed in different realities.
Which means what one group sees as completely outrageous, another finds perfectly logical. This understanding calls for immense humility and empathy in all financial discussions, because as investor Michael Batnick wisely puts it, some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood.
That idea of personal experience also helps explain some seemingly irrational behaviors, like the lottery ticket paradox.
Yes, exactly. Americans collectively spend more on lottery tickets than on movies, video games, music, sporting events, and books combined. It's a huge amount.
And who buys most of them?
Predominantly low-income households. They spend, on average, $412 a year, which is 4 times the amount spent by higher-income groups.
Okay, but here's the apparent contradiction. Roughly 40% of Americans can't come up with $400 in an emergency, yet many of those same individuals are spending that much or more on lottery tickets.
Right. When we connect this to the bigger picture, it truly prompts an important question. Why? From an outside, purely rational financial perspective, it seems completely counterproductive, almost baffling.
So why do they do it?
Well, for those struggling, the prospect of saving a significant amount of money might seem perpetually out of reach. Prospects for securing higher-paying wages feel equally distant. They can't realistically afford the nice vacations, new cars, comprehensive health insurance, or homes in safe neighborhoods that many of us already have and perhaps take for granted.
Okay, so it's about limited options.
In a way. So for them, buying a lottery ticket isn't a rational investment in the traditional sense. It's often the only time in their lives they can genuinely hold a tangible dream of getting the good stuff that others already possess.
So they're buying hope, essentially.
Exactly. They aren't paying for a rational return on investment. They are paying for hope, for a dream, an emotional purchase shaped by their unique experiences, and a deeply felt lack of other more conventional opportunities. Understanding this doesn't necessarily mean it's a good financial decision, but it makes it profoundly understandable.
It shows how personal history and emotions drive choices.
Absolutely. And another crucial point that helps explain why money decisions are so inherently difficult and why what we perceive as misbehavior is actually quite common is to recognize just how new many foundational concepts of modern money management truly are.
New. Like retirement.
Exactly. We are, in essence, all newbies when it comes to navigating these relatively recent financial systems and expectations.
It's remarkable to consider just how recent these concepts are. Take retirement, for example. At the end of 2018, there was a staggering $27 trillion in U.S. retirement accounts. It's huge.
A massive industry.
But the entire concept of being entitled to a dignified, work-free retirement is, at most, only 2 generations old. Before World War II, the prevailing expectation and reality for most Americans was simply to work until they died.
Hard to imagine now, isn't it?
And Social Security, when it first launched in 1940, paid out a minimal $22.54 per month. It wasn't until the 1980s that the average Social Security check exceeded $1,000 adjusted for inflation.
$22.
And more than a quarter of Americans over 65 were still living in poverty until the late 1960s. Even the widespread belief that everyone used to have a private pension is apparently wildly exaggerated. In 1975, only a quarter of those aged 65 or older had pension income.
So the good old days weren't necessarily that good for retirement.
Seems not. And this newness extends to even our most basic savings vehicles. The 401k, the backbone savings vehicle for so many, didn't even exist until 1978.
78. That's really recent in the grand scheme of things.
And the Roth IRA, another popular option, wasn't born until 1998, which, if it were a person, would barely be old enough to drink.
Good point. Given this timeline, it's really no surprise that many of us are still figuring out how to save and invest for retirement effectively. We're not crazy or incapable. We're simply navigating incredibly recent financial inventions with limited collective experience to draw upon.
And it's the same with college costs, right?
Absolutely. The share of Americans with a bachelor's degree went from less than 1 in 1940 to 1 in 4 by 2015, and average tuition quadrupled, adjusted for inflation, in just a few decades.
Quadrupled.
This rapid and unprecedented change explains why so many people have made what hindsight now shows as poor decisions with student loans. There simply aren't decades of accumulated experience or social wisdom to draw upon. We are essentially learning as we go, navigating uncharted territory.
So when you look at how much of our modern financial life, from index funds, which are less than 50 years old, to widespread consumer debt only taking off after WWII is actually so recent, it becomes clear that we're largely winging it with many major financial decisions.
Winging it sounds about right.
We have very little historical experience or ingrained societal wisdom to draw upon. This helps explain why we often think about money too much like physics, expecting predictable rules and laws, and not enough like psychology, where emotions, personal history, and nuanced human behaviors are the true, often unpredictable drivers.
Okay, shifting our lens from the individual, let's explore some unseen but incredibly powerful pillars that significantly influence financial outcomes: luck and risk. A key insight from the book is that financial success and failure are heavily influenced by these forces.
Right. Force is often overlooked because they're notoriously hard to measure and maybe even hard to accept. As NYU professor Scott Galloway so aptly puts it, nothing is as good or as bad as it seems.
That's a great quote. How does the book illustrate this? Well, it shares a truly compelling story about Bill Gates and his childhood friend Ken Evans. Bill Gates, as we know, co-founded Microsoft, became incredibly wealthy. But what's often overlooked in his success story is a critical piece of luck.
Luck. What was it?
He attended one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a computer back in 1968. Lakeside School leased a teletype Model 30, funded by the Mothers Club. Most university graduate schools didn't even have that kind of tech then.
Wow. So pure chance, basically.
Pretty much. Gates was just 13, and along with his equally ambitious classmate, Kent Evans, he became obsessed with this machine. They spent countless hours on it, dreaming of starting their own computer company. The book estimates Gates's access was, quite literally, 1 in a million luck.
1 in a million. But then there's the other side of that coin, the risk.
Exactly. Kent Evans, Bill Gates' close friend and intellectual peer, was just as brilliant, just as driven, just as consumed by computing. Gates himself recalls Kent could have been a founding partner of Microsoft.
So what happened to him?
Tragically, Kent died in a mountaineering accident before he even graduated high school. The odds of being killed on a mountain in high school are, chillingly, also roughly 1 in a million.
1 in a million luck, 1 in a million risk.
Wow. This powerful anecdote illustrates the same statistical force working in opposite directions, fundamentally challenging that pure meritocracy narrative we often tell ourselves.
Yeah, we like to think it's all about hard work and smarts.
It's easy and comforting to attribute everything solely to intelligence, effort, and decisions. But doing so often ignores the profound, often invisible role of luck. And conversely, attributing success to luck can make us look jealous.
And attributing your own success to luck feels, diminishing.
Exactly. It can be demoralizing. Consider economist Bhaskar Mazumdar's study. Incomes among brothers are more correlated than height or weight, suggesting parental socioeconomic status and inherited advantages influence success far more than we often like to acknowledge.
So let's really unpack this. How much of a business failure or a bad investment is truly poor judgment versus just ending up on the unfortunate side of risk?
It's impossible to know for sure, right? And our brains struggle with that ambiguity. We naturally prefer simple, clean, cause and effect stories.
We blame others for bad decisions, but our own failures are just bad luck.
Pretty much. Think about historical figures like Cornelius Vanderbilt. His aggressive, often law-flouting behavior is praised as shrewd wisdom now, but could easily have led to collapse. Or John D. Rockefeller, seen as cunning rather than criminal.
Even Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing.
Yes. Most of his immense success came from his investment in Geico stock, which, by his own admission, actually broke his own strict diversification rules. Was it one lucky break or one supremely shrewd decision? Can we tell them apart?
It's a trick question, isn't it?
Totally. Even Mark Zuckerberg turning down Yahoo.
Yeah.
$1 billion offer is seen as genius now, but Yahoo turning down Microsoft's offer is seen as foolish. It's all hindsight bias.
So what are the practical takeaways from understanding this interplay of luck and risk?
Well, first, be incredibly careful who you praise or condemn, and avoid that dangerous assumption that 100% of financial outcomes are solely due to effort and decisions.
Okay, humility again.
Second, focus less on extreme individual case studies, whether of success or failure, and more on broad recurring patterns. Extreme outcomes are often less applicable to your own life because they're heavily influenced by extreme luck or risk.
Makes sense. Don't model yourself after the 1 in a million exception.
Right. As Bill Gates said, success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. But failure, too, can be a lousy teacher, sometimes just reflecting bad luck. The ultimate lesson is to arrange your financial life with enough margin of safety to endure failures and keep playing the game. Don't get wiped out by one bad turn.
That idea of staying in the game leads us perfectly to the next insight. Compounding, the quiet, often underestimated power of time.
Yes, the core idea here is that the single most powerful financial force is compounding, but its counterintuitive, exponential nature is often completely overlooked because our brains are naturally wired for linear thinking.
We think in straight lines, but wealth grows on curves. Warren Buffett is the prime example, right?
He's the perfect living embodiment. His net worth is huge, $84.5 billion, but get this. $84.2 billion of that 99.6% was accumulated after his 50th birthday.
After 50, wow.
And $81.5 billion came after he qualified for Social Security in his mid-60s. What does this tell us? His success isn't just about his phenomenal investing acumen. It's about being a phenomenal investor for 3/4 of a century. Longevity is the absolute key.
So if he'd stopped earlier?
Had he started investing in his 30s with, say, $25,000 and then retired at 60, even with his extraordinary 22% annual returns, few would even know his name today. His greatness lies not just in how well he invested, but in how long he was able to keep doing it.
Okay, let's compare him. The book mentions Jim Simons.
Right. Jim Simons, the brilliant mathematician heading Renaissance Technologies. Simons has compounded money at an incredible 66% annually since 1988. That's 3 times Buffett's rate.
66%?
Yeah.
So he must be way richer than Buffett then.
You'd think so, but no. Simon's net worth is only $21 billion, which is a whopping 75% less than Buffett's.
How is that possible with treble the returns?
Because Simons only found his stride and started his serious investing at age 50, He had less than half the years to compound compared to Buffett. If Simons had Buffett's timeline, his net worth would literally be in sextillions, numbers too vast to even grasp.
Sextillions.
Oh.
Okay, that really shows the power of time over rate.
It does. These are extreme examples, but they powerfully illustrate how seemingly small differences in growth, especially paired with immense stretches of time, lead to astronomical differences in outcomes. It's the time, not just the rate.
But our brains just don't get exponential growth easily.
No, the challenge is our brains default to linear thinking. If I ask you to calculate 8 plus 8 plus 8, you can do it quickly, but trying to intuitively grasp 8 by 8 by 8 makes your head spin.
The linear versus exponential trap.
Exactly. It makes it incredibly difficult to intuitively grasp how quickly things grow with compounding. Think about hard drive storage. From maybe 3.5 megabytes in the 1950s to 100 terabytes today. Few in the 50s would have predicted 30 million times larger within my lifetime.
Even Bill Gates underestimated it with Gmail storage.
He did. In 2004, he wondered why anyone needed a gigabyte of storage. His thinking was still anchored in the old linear paradigm. You never truly get accustomed to how quickly things grow exponentially.
So the practical implication here is profound and actually quite liberating. Good investing isn't necessarily about earning the absolute highest returns.
Right. Those tend to be one-off hits, maybe fueled by luck and hard to repeat.
Instead, it's about earning pretty good returns year after year that you can stick with and repeat for the longest possible period of time. It's about consistency and patience.
Absolutely. As the book powerfully suggests, maybe the most impactful book on money should just be called Shut Up and Wait.
Just one page with a long-term growth chart.
Exactly, because that patience and longevity are the real magic behind compounding. It's the endurance, not just the brilliance, that builds true wealth.
Okay, let's shift our focus now. We've talked about getting wealthy, but what about the other side, keeping it? That seems way harder maybe.
It often is. There are a million different ways to get wealthy, tons of books about it. But as the psychology of money powerfully highlights, there's really only one reliable way to stay wealthy.
And what's that?
It's a unique combination of frugality and a healthy dose of paranoia. Ultimately, survival is the absolute paramount financial skill.
Survival. Okay, how does the book illustrate this difference between getting and staying wealthy?
It revisits the contrasting stories of Jesse Livermore and Abraham Jermansky. Jesse Livermore was this legendary, almost mythical stock market trader. By brilliantly shorting the market during the 1929 crash, he made the inflation-adjusted equivalent of $3 billion in a day.
$3 billion. Okay. He was celebrated globally. One of the richest men alive, seemed untouchable. Meanwhile, Abraham Jermansky, a multimillionaire real estate developer, lost absolutely everything in that same crash. Vanished, presumed dead.
So one winner, one loser from the same event.
But here's the critical plot twist, and it's a vital lesson. Just 4 years after his monumental triumph, Jesse Livermore, fueled by overconfidence and an insatiable desire for even greater returns, made larger and larger leveraged bets.
Oh boy.
He eventually lost everything, sank into immense debt, and tragically took his own life. So while both men, Livermore and Jermansky, were undeniably brilliant at getting wealthy, they were equally devastatingly bad at staying wealthy.
Wow. Their stories really underscore that difference. Getting rich and staying rich require different skills.
Profoundly different, almost diametrically opposed skills. And this impermanence of success is a stark reality. Did you know that over time, 40% of publicly traded companies effectively lose all their value?
40%, that's huge. And the Forbes 400 list sees about 20% turnover every decade, completely unrelated to death or inheritance. Capitalism is hard, constantly shifting, unforgiving.
So the skills are different. How?
Well, the skills for getting money often demand taking risks, being boldly optimistic, putting yourself out there. But the skills for keeping money, that demands humility, a healthy, almost paranoid fear of losing what you have, frugality, and accepting that some past success might have been luck.
Luck you can't count on repeating.
Exactly. This shift in mindset is crucial. Michael Moritz, the billionaire head of Sequoia Capital, attributed his firm's 4 decades of success not to brilliant strategies, but to being afraid of going out of business and never being complacent.
Only the paranoid survive.
That's the quote. This survival mindset is key because compounding only works if you give assets years, decades to grow. It requires enduring all the unpredictable ups and downs. You can't compound if you're wiped out.
What about Buffett again? His survival skills.
His enduring success has a hidden edge, often about what he didn't do. He didn't get carried away with debt. He didn't panic and sell during the 14 recessions he's lived through.
14.
He didn't sully his reputation. He didn't rigidly attach to one strategy. He didn't burn out. His ability to survive and stay in the game consistently from age 10 to his late 80s is what allowed compounding to work its wonders.
And there's that other guy, Rick Guerin.
Right, a third equally smart investor alongside Buffett and Munger. Guerin was, as the book puts it, in a hurry. He leveraged up, got margin calls in the 73-74 downturn, and was forced to sell his Berkshire stock. Warren and Charlie had that added skill of staying wealthy.
The skill that mattered most long-term. Nassim Taleb's quote about survival.
Yeah, having an edge and surviving are two different things. The first requires the second. You need to avoid ruin at all costs.
So what does this profound insight mean for your financial journey, listener? It means adopting a personal mantra like, more than I want big returns, I want to be financially unbreakable.
Unbreakable. I like that.
Think about it. No one wants to hold cash during a roaring bull market. It feels conservative. You see others getting rich. But if that cash buffer prevents you from being forced to sell stocks during a bear market,
then the actual return on that cash is huge.
Exactly. It could be many multiples higher than 1%, because preventing one desperate, ill-timed sale can do more for your lifetime returns than picking dozens of winners. Compounding thrives on merely good, consistent returns sustained, uninterrupted for the longest possible period, especially through chaos.
Which means planning is vital, but the most important part is assuming the plan won't go according to plan. You have to factor in the unexpected.
Like 9/11, the 2008 crisis, COVID.
Exactly. A truly robust financial plan doesn't pretend these won't happen. It embraces uncertainty and emphasizes building an ample room for error. This isn't about being timid. It's about proactively increasing your chances of survival and long-term success.
So frugal budget, flexible thinking, loose timeline.
Anything that lets you live happily and resiliently with a wide range of outcomes.
It calls for what the book describes as a barbelled personality, right?
Yeah.
Optimistic long-term, paranoid short-term.
Yes. Fiercely optimistic about the long-term future, but deeply paranoid about what specific short-term challenges will prevent you from getting there. You can believe the autonomy will grow long-term.
But also know the road is full of landmines.
Exactly. The two mindsets aren't mutually exclusive. They're complementary. You need that short-term paranoia to stay alive long enough to exploit the power of long-term optimism. As Jesse Livermore learned, thinking getting wealthy makes staying wealthy inevitable is a dangerous delusion.
Okay, let's explore perhaps the highest form of wealth money can buy, freedom.
Yeah.
The core idea here is that money's greatest intrinsic value, its highest dividend, is the control it gives you over your most precious resource, time.
Yeah, that ability to wake up and genuinely say, I can do whatever I want today.
Is there research on this?
Yes, psychologist Angus Campbell's research backs this up eloquently. He found that having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well-being than any of the objective conditions of life.
More dependable than salary or house size.
More than salary, house size, or even job prestige, according to Campbell. It's that autonomy over what you do, when you do it, with whom, and for how long.
And it doesn't take millions, right?
Not necessarily. A relatively small financial cushion can mean taking sick days without agonizing stress. A bit more means waiting for a truly good job after a layoff, not grabbing the first desperate offer.
6 months of emergency expenses means less fear of your boss.
Exactly. And ultimately, it means making the profound choice to retire when you want to, not when you need to.
I can relate to this personally. It was a real aha moment. Throughout college, I was dead set on investment banking, mostly for the high salary. Thought it would make me happier.
A common assumption.
My summer internship felt like I'd won the lottery. But on day one, I realized why they make so much money. They work longer, more controlled hours than I thought possible. Going home before midnight was a luxury.
Oof, that sounds brutal.
The job was stimulating, pay was great, but every second of my time was enslaved to my boss's demands, the market's whims. It turned what I thought I loved into misery. It was a 4-month internship. I barely lasted 1 month.
Wow. That feeling, that discomfort with losing autonomy has a psychological name. Reactance. It's that inherent human desire to feel in control.
Reactance. Makes sense.
When you're constantly told what to do, even if it's something you enjoy, it feels disempowering. So aligning money towards a life granting genuine control over time has an almost incalculable return for your well-being.
Like Derek Sivers' story.
Perfect example. By saving just $12,000 by age 22, he quit his job to become a full-time musician. He later said selling his company for much more didn't fundamentally change his quality of life. The real freedom happened at 22.
That leads to a paradox, doesn't it? Modern wealth versus happiness. The U.S. is richer than ever, but are people happier?
Little evidence suggests they are happier than in the 1950s, despite far lower material wealth then. A 2019 Gallup poll even found Americans report more worry and stress than the global average.
We've used wealth to buy bigger and better stuff.
Bigger homes, more bathrooms, better cars, TVs, gadgets.
But simultaneously, we've inadvertently given up control over our time.
And those two trends often cancel each other out in terms of well-being. Consider John D. Rockefeller. His job wasn't physical labor, it was thinking, making decisions, working in his head.
Which was rare back then, mostly farming or factory work.
Very different. Today, most jobs are thought-based managers, professionals, service jobs. Your primary tool is your head, which never leaves you.
And this is where it gets fascinating for modern life. You think about work during your commute, dinner, putting kids to sleep, waking up stressed at 3 a.m.
Feels like you're working 24/7, diminishing that crucial control over time, even if you technically clock fewer hours than someone in 1950.
The lessons from the elderly in Carl Pillimer's research really resonate here.
They do. After interviewing 1,000 elderly Americans, not one said happiness comes from working hard just for more money or being richer than peers.
What do they value?
Quality friendships, being part of something bigger than themselves, and crucially unstructured. Quality time with children and loved ones. As Pellimer wrote, your kids don't want your money anywhere near as much as they want you.
Wow. That powerfully reinforces the idea that control over time, not just stuff, is the highest dividend money pays. Let's delve into some more subtle insights, starting with the man in the car paradox and the idea that wealth is what you don't see.
Right, the paradox is simple. People often chase wealth, believing it signals respect and admiration. But weirdly, others tend to admire the expensive item, the car, the house, not necessarily the person owning it.
You think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool.
Exactly. The author recalls being a valet. Seeing a luxury car, his thought wasn't, wow, that driver's cool. It was always, wow, if I had that car, I would look cool.
So the admiration is for the object and how we'd feel owning it.
Precisely. Most people impressed by a fancy car don't give driver a moment's thought. It applies to big homes, jewelry, designer clothes too.
And this ties into a crucial distinction many people miss, like the Rihanna story.
Yes. She nearly went bankrupt, sued her advisor. His blunt retort. Was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money?
Sounds obvious, but easily overlooked when chasing status.
Many say they want to be a millionaire, but often mean, I'd like to spend $1 million, which is literally the inverse of being a millionaire.
Being a millionaire means you have it, not that you spent it.
This brings us to the critical difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich is primarily current income. Easily spotted, often conspicuously displayed expensive cars, grand homes.
Visible spending.
Right. Someone driving a $100,000 car might be wealthy, or they might just have $100,000 less or more debt. They often go out of their way to show it.
But wealth is hidden.
Fundamentally hidden. It's income earned, but not spent. Financial assets, investments, savings, not yet converted into visible stuff. It's an option deferred, offering flexibility, security, potential for growth.
The book uses a diet and exercise analogy.
Yeah, a really relatable one. Exercise, being rich, is hard, but people often undo it by eating more. Wealth is turning down that treat meal and actually burning net calories, creating a deliberate gap between what you could do and what you choose to do.
Requires self-control, quiet confidence.
Exactly. The problem is it's easy to find rich role models. Their spending is visible, aspirational. But true wealth is hidden, hard to imitate or learn from by observation.
Like Ronald Reed, the wealthy janitor. No one knew while he was alive.
Precisely because his wealth was unseen, silently compounding. It's challenging to learn from what you can't observe, which makes building genuine wealth complex.
Which leads us directly to the unsung hero, simply saving money.
Yes, the core idea here is that building substantial wealth has surprisingly little to do with income or investment returns, and lots to do with your consistent savings rate.
The oil efficiency analogy is powerful here.
It is. In the 70s, fears of running out of oil. We overcame it not just by finding more oil, uncertain, but by becoming far more energy efficient in our control. U.S. uses 60% less energy per dollar of GDP than in 1950, MPG doubled.
Finding more oil depends on external factors. Efficiency is within our control.
What's fascinating is how directly that applies to personal finance. Investment returns are uncertain, influenced by forces beyond your control. But your personal savings rate and frugality.
Entirely within your control.
And they have a 100% chance of being effective, contributing to your wealth. If building wealth hinges on external factors like high income or huge returns, it feels daunting. But if it's powered by your own consistent frugality and efficiency,
The path becomes clearer, more empowering, more achievable.
wealth, fundamentally, is just the accumulated leftovers after you spend what you take in. You can absolutely build significant wealth without high income, but you have virtually no chance without a high, consistent savings rate.
And crucially, the value of wealth is relative to what you need.
Yes. Being genuinely happy with less creates a powerful gap between what you have and what you want. A gap feeling as good as a raise, but easier to achieve and fully in your control.
Past a certain point, spending is just ego keeping up with income.
Exactly. So one of the most powerful ways to increase savings isn't necessarily a higher paying job, but to raise your humility, simply not caring what others think about your possessions, shedding that social pressure.
And you don't actually need a specific reason to save.
Not necessarily. Saving for a house, car, retirement, all great. But saving just for saving's sake as a general principle is equally, if not more, important.
Besides that.
Our world is unpredictable. Saving without a specific goal acts as an invaluable hedge against life's inevitable surprises, which often strike at the worst moments. This unassigned saving grants profound control over time, expands future options, provides flexibility, empowers you to wait for opportunities or weather storms without distress.
This raises a truly important question for you, listener. What's the actual return on having enough cash to change careers, retire early, or just be free from worry?
The book calls this return incalculable, so large, so important, we can't put a simple price on it. And what we can't measure, we often tragically overlook.
This flexibility is a huge competitive advantage now.
Absolutely. In a hyper-competitive world, intelligence isn't a unique edge anymore. Flexibility, the ability to wait, learn new skills, find your niche, change course on your own terms, is an invaluable currency. More control over time and options is arguably one of the most valuable forms of wealth today.
Okay, moving on to mastering your financial mindset. Let's explore why reasonable is greater than rational. The core idea is that humans are, well, screwed up emotional beings, not spreadsheets.
Right. So when I'm making important financial decisions, the truly effective aim should be to be reasonable, not coldly rational. Reasonable is more realistic, acknowledges our human nature, and crucially, is much more sustainable long term.
How does the book illustrate this, that story about the psychiatrist?
Yes, the fascinating, if unsettling story of Julius Wagner-Jahrweg, a 19th century psychiatrist who won the Nobel Prize. His groundbreaking cure for neurosyphilis involved inducing malaria fevers.
Malaria fevers.
Yeah.
Seriously.
He realized fevers, despite being uncomfortable, profoundly helped fight infection. Penicillin made it obsolete, but his insight that fevers hurt but are biologically beneficial was way ahead of its time. Modern science confirms fevers' slow virus replication, vital for immunity.
This raises a truly important question tying to finance. Despite overwhelming science that normal fevers are good for sick children, people universally fight them with drugs. Why?
Because fevers hurt. They cause discomfort. People instinctively avoid pain. The perfectly rational scientific solution clashes directly with the fundamental human desire to avoid pain.
And this same conflict applies to financial decisions.
Directly and powerfully. Consider Harry Markowitz, Nobel laureate, pioneer of modern portfolio theory, the bedrock of rational diversification. Even he confessed he invested his own money in a simple 50-50 stock bond split.
Not because it was mathematically optimal.
No, simply because he worried deeply about future regret. He was being reasonable, prioritizing emotional comfort over theoretical optimization.
Or that Yale leverage study.
Right. Researchers showed young savers could be better off supercharging accounts with 2-to-1 margin, even risking being wiped out young if they got back in. The math is rational.
But the strategy is absurdly unreasonable for a normal person's stress tolerance. No one could live like that.
Precisely. This is a critical insight. If pursuing a perfectly rational strategy pushes you emotionally and increases odds you'll abandon it when things get tough, then rational thinking becomes a liability.
So reasonable is better because you stick with it.
Exactly. The book argues reasonable investors who love their technically imperfect strategies have a profound edge because they're far more likely to stick with those strategies through thick and thin. And that unwavering commitment, especially during tough years, correlates highly with long-term performance. Consistency beats fleeting perfection.
There are other examples, right? Like home bias.
Countless examples. Home bias, investing heavily in your own country. Rationally, it makes no diversification sense. But it's perfectly reasonable if familiarity helps you feel comfortable and stay invested during volatility, preventing panic selling.
Even day trading, maybe.
Even day trading or individual stock picking, rarely rational or profitable, can be reasonable in very small amounts if it satisfies an itch for excitement, and crucially, keeps you from messing with your core, diversified long-term investments.
Forecasting, too. We know it's usually wrong.
But making forecasts is reasonable. It's human nature to want to know the future, and Jack Bogle investing in his son's high-fee fund. We do some things for family reasons. If it's not consistent, well, life isn't always consistent. Human behavior is complex, driven by more than logic.
Okay, let's transition to challenging our assumptions about the future. Surprise. The idea that history is a guide, but definitely not a map.
Yes, the core idea is things that have never happened before happen all the time. History helps calibrate expectations, identify pitfalls, enduring behaviors, but it's fundamentally not a blueprint for predicting the future, especially because human emotions constantly influence finance, making it less predictable than physics.
The historians as prophets fallacy.
Exactly. An over-reliance on past data in investing, a field driven by innovation, psychology, constant change. Richard Feynman quipped, "Imagine how much harder physics would be if electrons had feelings." Well, investors do have feelings.
Which makes past data misleading sometimes.
Especially since the most impactful events, Great Depression, WWII, dot-com bubble, 9/11, are often tail events or black swans, virtually impossible to predict with no direct historical precedent.
And things are interconnected in weird ways. The butterfly effect.
Yes, the book links 19 hijackers on 9/11 to the $1.6 trillion student loan debt through a complex chain. Fed rate cuts, housing bubble, financial crisis, poor job market pushing people to college.
Wow. So major current events trace back to unpredictable past ones.
The staggering truth is, the majority of what's happening now in the global economy can be tied back to a handful of past events nearly impossible to foresee.
Like the Fukushima analogy. Building for the worst past earthquake.
Right. If the next quake is unprecedented, planning based on the past is a failure of imagination, not analysis. Same in finance. Daniel Kahneman said, "The correct lesson to learn from surprises, that the world is surprising."
Not using past surprises as future limits, but admitting we have no idea what might happen next.
Exactly. And history can also mislead because the world changes structurally. The 401k is only 42 years old. Older retirement advice might be irrelevant. Even Benjamin Graham adapted his strategies, admitting the situation has changed a great deal. Rigid adherence to old formulas can be dangerous.
So while it's different this time, is dangerous.
The world does genuinely change. John Templeton admitted it is different maybe 20% of the time. General human behaviors, greed, fear, are stable, but specific trends, trades, relationships evolve. It's about drawing lessons from human nature, not expecting history to perfectly repeat.
Which leads us to room for error, tying back to survival.
Yes, the core idea. You absolutely must plan for your plan, not going according to plan. Ample room for error, a robust margin of safety, is vital for survival and success in an uncertain world.
Like blackjack card counting.
Perfect analogy. Skilled counters understand odds, not certainties. They bet more when odds are favorable, but never everything. One wrong hand can wipe them out. There is never a moment when you're so right that you can bet every chip in front of you. Always need that buffer.
But we humans constantly underestimate the need for it.
Consistently. Stock analysts give precise targets, not ranges. Economic forecasters offer exact figures. The Harvard study on home renovations, people estimate others' projects go 25-50% over budget, but their own. Always on time, on budget.
Cue the inevitable disappointment.
Room for error isn't just a financial buffer, it's a strategic advantage. It lets you endure a wider range of outcomes, letting you stick around long enough for compounding to work. The biggest gains are infrequent, unpredictable. The person with enough room for error, like cash reserves, to endure hardship elsewhere, has a significant edge.
Like Gates and Buffett always having ample cash.
Exactly. Gates' incredibly conservative approach, always having a year's payroll. Buffett pledging, "Always run Berkshire with more than ample cash. I will not trade even a night's sleep for the chance of extra profits." Success wasn't just maximizing returns, but minimizing ruin risk.
And there's an emotional side too, right? A 30% drop on paper versus reality.
Crucial point. What does that sustained loss do to your psyche? Confidence. Resolve to stay invested can shatter when opportunity is highest. The book calls this having a gap between what you can technically endure versus what's emotionally possible, an overlooked but critical version of room for error. Need a buffer for your mental state, too.
This connects to optimism bias, the Russian roulette syndrome.
Yes, Nassim Taleb's concept. You can be risk-loving and yet completely averse to ruin. Odds might be 95% in your favor, but if the 5% downside means total, irreversible ruin, it's not worth it.
Leverage is often the devil here.
It pushes routine risks into ruinous ones, masking the true odds of being wiped out. Those wiped out homeowners in 2009, Lehman Brothers lose wealth and the critical opportunity to re-enter the game.
Room for error also protects against the unknown unknowns.
Absolutely. Things you simply couldn't imagine. The WWII German tanks disabled by mice eating electrical insulation unforeseeable.
A tank designer doesn't think about mice.
But these unforeseeable existential risks happen. Startups face floods, break-ins, health department calls, spoofed emails, founder breakdowns, none foreseeable, all potential threats. Avoiding single points of failure, like relying solely on one paycheck, is crucial, save for the financial equivalent of those field mice.
Okay, let's consider another powerful factor. You'll change. We're bad at predicting our future selves.
Remarkably poor forecasters. We consistently underestimate how much our personalities, desires, values, goals will evolve.
Like the doctor story. Achieved his dream, then hated it.
Exactly. Highlights Daniel Gilbert's end of history illusion. We believe we've finally become the person we were always meant to be right now and won't change much further. Yet we're keenly aware of past changes. This applies from age 18 to 68.
This illusion massively impacts financial planning. How do you stick to a long-term plan when what you want fundamentally shifts?
It's incredibly challenging. Buffett's and Reed's success came partly from doing the same thing for decades, letting compounding run wild. Many of us evolved too much to stick to one rigid path without feeling stifled or regretful.
So what are practical solutions?
One key is avoiding extremes. Committing to very low income or endless hours for high income often leads to regret. The benefits wear off, downsides become enduring regrets. Can't retire, missed life.
Balance is key.
Aiming for moderate savings, sufficient free time, reasonable commutes, family time at every stage encourages endurance, minimizes future regret.
And accepting you'll change your mind.
Crucial mental flexibility. Some miserable workers stay loyal to a career picked at 18. Accepting the end of history illusion means realizing odds of picking a job or goal you'll still love decades later are low.
Kahneman's no sunk costs mentality.
Yes. Willing to detonate what we had just done and start over if it wasn't working, despite time invested. This ability to abandon old goals without mercy if they no longer serve your evolving self is vital for adapting your financial journey, getting back to compounding and building the life you now want.
Let's move to an idea that seems simple but is often misunderstood. Nothing's free. Everything has a price, especially in finance, but it's often invisible until you've paid it.
Right. Former GE CEO Jeff Immelt said every job looks easy when you're not the one doing it. From outside, a CEO's job looks glamorous, but the invisible challenges, bloat, investors, regulators are huge. Same with market returns. S&P 500 up 119-fold in 50 years looks easy.
Just sit back and let it compound.
But the price was dreadfully high volatility. The Dow was below its previous all-time high 94% of that time.
94%.
Yeah.
That's the real kicker. Think about high-growth stocks like Netflix or Monster Beverage. Phenomenal returns.
Life-changing returns. But the hidden price was constant, gut-wrenching volatility. They traded below their previous all-time highs 94% and 95% of days, respectively.
Volatility isn't a bug, it's the non-negotiable admission fee.
Exactly. Trying to avoid this price, like with tactical funds timing the market, largely fails. They often gained less or were just as volatile. You can't escape the fee.
And individual investors underperform by trying to avoid it too. Buying high, selling low.
Yes, trying to get the return while avoiding the volatility. By trying to avoid the price, they tragically end up paying double.
The fundamental problem is the price isn't obvious, like a price tag.
Exactly. When the market dips, your portfolio drops, it doesn't feel like a fee for getting something good. It feels like a fine for doing something wrong. Humans instinctively avoid fines.
So the key is shifting your mindset.
What's truly fascinating here is consciously viewing market volatility as a fee like a Disneyland ticket, worth the lines and potential rain, rather than a penalty to avoid. This is crucial for long-term success. You pay for the experience, the potential growth, market returns, demand a price. You usually get what you pay for.
Now let's explore when you'll believe anything. the power of stories.
Stories are arguably the most powerful force shaping our beliefs and decisions, especially when we desperately want something true or face high stakes with limited control and search for answers.
Like the alien observing the U.S. from 2007 to 2009.
Perfect illustration. Physically, little change. Same cities, factories, roads, knowledge, tools. Yet, households $16 trillion poorer, 10 million more unemployed, stock market halved. The only thing the alien couldn't see that did change.
The stories we told ourselves about the economy.
Exactly. In 2007, the narrative was housing stability, prudent bankers. In 2009, that story broke, leading to defaults, reduced lending, layoffs, recession. We inflicted profound narrative damage on ourselves.
This speaks to appealing fictions. We believe things we desperately want to be true.
Especially with limited control and high stakes. The centenarian recalling Armistice Day is happiest because we knew there would be no more wars ever again. Appealing fiction from hope, though WWII started 21 years later.
Or the Yemeni father believing a burning stick could cure his sick son.
Because when you have no money and your son is sick, you'll believe anything. During London's Great Plague, quacks sold infallible preventive pills. High stakes make people cling to any story offering hope or control.
And this applies directly to finance. Why listen to TV commentators with poor track records?
Because the stakes are high your financial future. The possibility, however remote, of extreme rewards, even 1% chance of life-changing outcome, makes people suspend disbelief, believe what they want.
Bernie Madoff's scheme.
His promise of consistent returns, unknown auditor, secret methods, believed by some of the most sophisticated investors because he told a good story and people wanted to believe it. Even policymakers rarely predict recessions publicly, an appealing fiction making careers less complicated.
This leads to the different games trap. Financial decisions influenced by people playing a different game.
Exactly, leading to confusion, irrational behavior, disappointment. What price should you pay for Google stock? Depends entirely on your time horizon goals. Long-term investor versus day trader value it differently.
During the dot-com and housing bubbles.
Short-term traders, flippers, rationally chased momentum, pushing prices disastrous for long-term investors. You saw absurd prices, wondered if they knew something you didn't.
But they were just playing a different game.
With a shorter horizon, different objectives. Same with social spending. We see others, cars, homes, clothes, but not their goals, debt, worries. A lawyer maintains appearance. A writer works in sweatpants. If their purchases set your expectations, you're wandering down a path of potential disappointment.
Spending money without getting their benefits or fulfilling their needs.
The vital importance here is consciously identifying and defining your game. The author. I am a passive investor optimistic in the world's ability to generate real economic growth. Once you define your game, goals, horizon, you can ignore unrelated noise, short-term dips, gloomy forecasts, irrelevant to your plan, others' spending, and not be swayed by those playing differently.
And finally, the seduction of pessimism. Pessimism sounds smarter, gets more attention, even though optimism is usually the better long-term bet.
It's undeniably true. True optimism isn't blind faith. It's believing the odds of a good outcome are in your favor over time, even with setbacks. Serious possibilism.
Yet pessimism has this allure, like Igor Panarin's apocalyptic U.S. forecast on WSJ's front page in 2008.
Contrast that with an absurd but true positive forecast for post-WWII Japan economy, 15x bigger, life expectancy doubled. That optimism would have been laughed at then. Pessimism just sounds smarter and more plausible. It grabs attention. Threats feel more urgent.
Why is it so seductive?
Several reasons. First, instinctual loss aversion. Kahneman. Threats feel urgent for survival. Second, money is ubiquitous. Financial issues affect everyone. Third, reporting asymmetry. 1% rise mentioned briefly, 1% fall in bold red. Decline narratives common. Ascent is supposed to happen.
Fourth, failure to account for adaptations.
Yes. Pessimists extrapolate trends without recognizing how markets, tech, people adapt. Lester Brown's 2008 oil shortage prediction missed the fracking boom. Problems correct and people adapt. Threats incentivize solutions in equal magnitude.
And progress is slow, setbacks fast.
Exactly. Lots of overnight tragedies, rarely overnight miracles. Wright brothers' flight unnoticed for years, a crash is instant news. Medical progress. 70% drop in heart disease deaths since 65 saves 500,000 lives here, largely unnoticed slow, unlike sudden terrorism.
Business too. Years to see product importance, failures overnight, careers, lifetime to build reputation, One email to destroy.
The sharp sting of pessimism prevails. The compounding pull of long-term optimism goes quietly unnoticed.
This insight underscores that volatility and loss are the price of growth.
Exactly. Pessimism reduces expectations, narrowing the gap between possible outcomes and outcomes you feel great about. Stephen Hawking. My expectations were reduced to 0 when I was 21. Everything since then has been a bonus. Expecting difficulty is paradoxically often the best way to be pleasantly surprised and cultivate resilience.
Okay, let's bring all these incredible insights together and reflect on how they apply directly to you, our listener. The chapter, You and Me, highlights a fundamental truth. Financial decisions are deeply personal.
Profoundly personal, yeah. Influenced by unique experiences, goals, values, fears. What works effectively, practically, and emotionally for one person might not work for another at all.
Like the how doctors die analogy.
It's remarkably similar. Doctors with the most scientific understanding often choose palliative comfort care for themselves facing terminal illness, not the aggressive treatments they might recommend patients. They know the odds, the data.
But their personal choice reflects what feels right for them, their quality of life.
Exactly. Financial decisions, similarly, are often made at the dinner table, influenced by wanting to minimize disappointment for a spouse, align with family values. These human factors are hard to quantify, vary wildly. No single right answer for everyone. You have to find what works for you.
The author shares his family's approach as an example. Their goal isn't vast riches, but independence, doing what they want on their terms.
Inspired by his father, an ER doctor who quit after 2 decades when he felt financially able. That ability to change course when you're ready to change careers, take a sabbatical, retire early, seems like the ultimate goal for many.
How did they achieve it?
High savings rate, remarkably consistent, relatively flat lifestyle. Despite incomes rising for over a decade, they consciously maintained the moderate lifestyle from their 20s. Virtually every dollar of raise has accrued to savings, our independence fund.
They got the goalpost of lifestyle desires to start moving at a young age.
Exactly. High savings rate, but they don't feel frugal because aspirations for stuff haven't moved much. Leads to contentment, not constant striving.
And they made personal choices, like paying off the house early.
Yes, for the immense independent feeling, even if financially indefensible on paper for maximizing returns. But as the author notes, at some point you have to choose between being happy or being right.
They also keep a lot in cash, more than usually recommended.
Around 20%, specifically to avoid being forced to sell stocks during unexpected expenses or downturns. Cash is the oxygen of independence, the book says, ensures they never interrupt long-term compounding unnecessarily.
And their investing strategy is simple.
Equally simple, aligned with goals. Every leftover dollar into broad U.S. and international index funds. No picking sectors, timing recessions, chasing hot stocks. Relies fundamentally on high savings, patience, optimism for global growth.
Because little correlation between investment effort and investment results.
As long as you capture the few things truly important, it's ultimately about doing whatever maximizes sleeping well at night and living a life feeling genuinely free, aligned with your values. So, as we've explored this deep dive, several truly powerful, universally applicable principles emerge. Not prescriptive rules, but guideposts. First, less ego, more wealth. True wealth comes from suppressing what you could buy today for more options later. Cultivate the gap between ego and income.
Second, manage money to sleep at night. The best universal guide. Not maximizing returns, but finding peace of mind.
Third, be nicer and less flashy. Real respect comes more from kindness and humility than possessions.
Fourth, save. Just save. Save not just for specific goals, but as a hedge against life's inevitable surprises. Grants flexibility, control over time.
Fifth, define the cost of success and be ready to pay it. Volatility and uncertainty are fees for market returns, not fines. Accept them as the price of admission.
Sixth, worship room for error. Buffers ensure endurance, crucial for compounding, protect against unknowns.
Seventh, avoid the extreme ends of financial decisions. Goals change. Balance in saving, working, free time minimizes future regret, allows adaptability.
Eighth, like risk, but be paranoid of ruinous risk. Take calculated risks, but avoid any risk that can wipe you out. Survival is paramount.
Ninth, define the game you're playing. Know your goals, horizon, values. Don't be swayed by others playing differently.
And finally, respect the mess. Money is a soft skill, not hard science. Smart, reasonable people disagree. No single right answer, only what works for you. This truly raises an important question for you, our listener, as we wrap up. What new insights, what shifts in perspective will you personally take from this deep dive into the psychology of money to redefine your own relationship with money? How will you integrate these powerful behavioral insights into your financial journey to build a life of not just wealth, but true financial resilience, independence, and peace of mind? As we wrap up this deep dive into the psychology of money, we hope you found some valuable insights that spark curiosity and ignite growth in your own financial journey.
If you're enjoying what you hear, please consider taking a moment to subscribe, rate, like, and comment on any of the platforms you're listening from. This really helps support our channel and allows us to get better and bring you even more great content.
If today's review sparked your interest and you're ready to dive into a copy of the book, please consider using the link in our description to make your purchase. Not only does it make it easy for you to get your hands on the book, but it also directly supports our channel and the author, allowing us to keep bringing you more great content.
Thanks again for being a part of the Daily Review community.